You're listening to CreepGeeks Podcast. Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/CheapGeek. So it begins again. Welcome back to the CreepGeeks Podcast, episode number 147.
Season 4, Tesla's CyberTruck from the future, listener emails, and Flatwoods monster.
Yeah.
Load it.
Yeah. What?
So welcome back to the CreepGeeks Podcast, episode number 147. It's a continuation of our last podcast, episode number 146, because that's the way they all go. So if you go in order, and this is your first time tuning into the podcast, you have 140-something episodes to catch up.
Ish.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So anyway, here's the deal. With our podcast, you don't particularly have to do that. You can actually listen to the podcast anytime you want, at your leisure. Basically, anywhere you listen to a podcast, you'll be able to find our podcast. So yeah. So we don't serialize it. So it's not one of those things where if you miss the last episode, well, you have to, it's not like that. Because we do a paranormal and weird news podcast.
Yeah.
Right? So when people say, what's the podcast about? What do you say, Omi?
Well, I say the CreepGeeks Podcast is an offbeat news podcast that takes a lighthearted approach to the paranormal, cryptid, strange, the silly, and trending tech topics circulating the web, broadcasting paranormal news and fun stories from our underground bunker in the mountains of western North Carolina.
Yeah. So there you go. That's what the podcast is all about. Paranormal and weird news. So anyway, our last podcast, episode number 146, was the beginning of season 4, and we kind of kicked it off talking about some of the things that we've been doing, because we've been gone for a little while, doing these festivals and conferences and events, or cons, as people in the know say.
On the road, living the con life.
Yeah, living the con life.
Hashtag con life.
Hashtag garbage towns everywhere.
Don't say that.
Well,
Some of these events have been wonderful.
Yeah. We have a saying when we go to some of these events to come on down to garbage town.
That's when Greg gets a bad vibe.
Yeah, so we've been doing these conferences for a while, and one of the ones that we've just recently done, that we had a really good time at, sort of took us on a journey. A journey to see some stuff. As in things like the Flatwood Monster. Yes.
And Moth.
And Moth Guy.
Would you stop?
Yes. Moth Person, right?
Yeah.
Kecksburg UFO site thing.
The Kecksburg UFO incident.
Yes. Well, we went to the area. We weren't part of the incident. Just full disclosure. Yeah. And the Western Pennsylvania Conference on the Conference on the Unexplained.
Which was really awesome.
Yeah.
So.
And you know what was explained? Nothing. It was still unexplained when we left. So.
That's because we were vendors. I'm sure if you'd popped into a couple of talks.
No, technically we were not vendors. We were exhibitors.
Yes.
I'm not sure exactly what the difference is. I guess a vendor and an exhibitor can do the same thing. Well, you could show off your wares and sell, or you can sell and show off your wares. It's the same thing. I think it's just more classy because it's further up the East Coast.
That's true.
Yeah. Oh, are you guys vendors? No, we're exhibitors. It says so on the badge. So anyway.
Actually, it was a really good event.
Yeah, it was great.
So, yeah.
And we're leading to that. So anyway, our adventure to go to the Western Pennsylvania Conference on the Unexplained took us to a couple different places. One of those is the Sutton, West Virginia area. We will talk about the Flatwoods Monster. Mm. But before we do that and get to the good part, let's tell you about the boring parts of what we have to say.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, a couple different things. Right? This is our housekeeping, if you will. You can support the podcast by doing a couple different things. So, if you're wondering what those things are.
The first thing you can do is interact with us. You can call the show and leave us a message. We have a voicemail inbox that you can call and leave your detailed message or tip or lead on anything weird or interesting, that phone number, it's going to be 575-208-4025.
Yes.
You can also email us, and that's going to be contact@creepgeeks.com.
Yes.
And then finally, did you know you can support the podcast with little to no effort on your part? It won't cost you anything. And basically, when you shop on Amazon.com, like everybody does, you can use our affiliate link, and we get a small percentage. That affiliate link is going to be in the show notes for this podcast episode, but it's amazon.com/shop/cheapgeek.
Yes.
This doesn't change your price at all, and it helps keep the coffee flowing and gas in the Albino Rhino, our DIY adventure, con life, investigation.
That's not what it's called.
Mobile.
No.
What is it?
It's our super cool van that we drive around in when we do these sort of things. And with this previous adventure, we actually sort of camped out, kept it real. So it was real cold, and we'll get to that.
Yeah.
So anyway, this begins our Flatwoods Monster adventure, and we'll talk about a couple different things with the Flatwoods Monster and some of the things that we actually experienced. But as we do with each one of our podcasts, we like to start off our podcast with an interesting random factoid.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Well, this interesting random factoid is actually about what we're going to talk about in this episode, and it's the Flatwoods Monster ceramic lantern.
What?
Yes. So if you travel to Flatwoods, West Virginia, and you go to the museum, or you're really into this cryptid, you'll recognize this very cute ceramic handmade lantern. And this lantern is the oldest Flatwoods keepsake and longest produced novelty keepsake made to commemorate the Flatwoods Monster event.
Yeah.
And it's one of the longest produced keepsakes for, I guess, West Virginia.
Yeah.
Yeah. Basically since, I think it was like the 60s. And originally it was created by a group of young professionals, the Braxton County JCs, and they were trying to find a way to fund a local school project. So one or two of them got together, came up with this idea, and originally they used it, and as a fundraiser, it took off really well, but it kept selling.
Yeah, it's like a ceramic lantern.
It's cute. I kind of like it.
We should have bought it while we were there, but we didn't because we're cheapskates.
Would you stop?
Because guess who's poor? We are.
Stop.
Coming to you from our poor No, we didn't. I don't know why.
Actually,
we should have bought it, but we didn't. So
we stopped at the gas station.
No.
I just didn't go in.
No. We stopped at the gas station to get gas because we were on a mission to go see the Mothman.
That, and I was afraid I might break it.
But, just for future reference, if you want to go to and buy one of these while you're in Sutton, West Virginia, go to the museum. They have them there. Yeah. So anyway, let's tell you about our adventure. We got up in the morning, packed our van, and left. That's pretty much it. No, and then we drove, see? And here's the thing. We didn't realize that, we knew how far it was, but we just didn't realize how long it was going to take to actually get us to Sutton, West Virginia. So
you keep calling it Sutton. I just going to keep calling it Flatwoods. So. Well,
it's in Sutton, West Virginia, because that's kind of where you want to go. But what we didn't realize was leaving from where we are here in Western North Carolina and driving that we would pass through Virginia. And then like a little tip of Virginia, then we'd pass through Tennessee, and then we passed through West Virginia, and then we passed through Ohio and back into West Virginia for our entire trip.
Yeah.
Right. So when we drove, we didn't realize, about how far it was going to be, but so we drove to Sutton, West Virginia, and the weather was supposed to be amazing and like 60 degrees and sunny.
And wonderful.
And it was 19 and rain. Which is not good.
No.
And there was lots and lots of dead deer animals.
Oh my gosh.
Just out there frolicking on the highway.
Well, they're no longer frolicking.
Yeah. Some of them, they just didn't do as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was the thing. So that was pretty much our trip to get to Sutton, West Virginia.
Yeah.
And when we got there, we were able to go to the Flatwoods Museum and talk to the curator, and life was great. Now, before we get to talking about what we talked about with Flatwoods Monster, with the curator, and we call him the curator because that's not really his title. But
Executive Director.
Yeah, technically he's the executive director, but he will be the curator because I think that'd be a cooler title to wear. Like on a shirt or a hat. Curator. Right. Because, I mean, he did. He's really knowledgeable. So.
Yeah.
But anyway, before we do that, let's take care of some news because we normally do paranormal and weird news. And the Flatwoods Monster and us talking about what the Flatwoods Monster is, otherwise known also as the Green Monster, the Braxton County Monster, the West Virginia Monster.
Braxxie.
So, Braxxie is this stupid nickname.
I think it's adorable.
And that's exactly why I don't like it. Anyway, because this thing was not adorable. Let's talk about two things that are in the news before we roll into Flatwoods, which will take up the remainder of our show.
Okay.
And one is a photograph that appeared on Coast to Coast AM. It's allegedly of the Jersey Devil. Jersey Devil.
The Dizzle.
Oh, the Dizzle. Jersey Devil was allegedly photographed in Pennsylvania. I almost said Pennsylvania. So in Pennsylvania, the Jersey Devil captured on film. Now, I'm sorry, there is a picture, right? Mm-hmm. And it looks like a little video clip.
But it's not.
But it doesn't look like it to me. It doesn't look like a Jersey Devil. It looks more like, not Mothman. Not, what's the Godzilla monster?
Mothra?
No, that's the moth. This one, this one's like the flying lizard looking thing. It was his enemy, not, I don't know. It's going to drive me crazy now. No, it's actually not going to drive me crazy. I can't think of what it's called.
Gamera.
No, Gamera was the turtle, right?
Yeah.
Rodon? Looks kind of like Rodon.
Rodon.
So anyway, this thing, there's
a
video.
It's Rodon.
Yeah, it looks just like Rodon. I mean, Rodon was kind of like a flying bat/dragon. There's a video that's playing on YouTube, which is basically like a slideshow. There's one frame of this thing.
And an annoying computer-generated voice.
In it, yeah, that talks about... But anyway, this thing does not look like the Jersey Devil. It looks kind of like a bat.
Carrying a watermelon.
No, but it really looks like Rodon.
Yeah.
From Godzilla. Who's been added in there. And I don't think it's for real.
I don't either. And my thing was, this originally came out years ago, and they're just now reporting it.
I've seen this years ago reported as something else.
Yeah.
But according to witnesses, the oddity sported both bat-like wings as well as a goat head, which eerily matches the description of the legendary entity known as the Jersey Devil. This doesn't look real to me. It looks like Rodon from Godzilla.
And it's also Pennsylvania as opposed to Jersey. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm really hesitant to, I don't know.
Now, the more logical explanation would be is that it really is a bat, and just the angle at which it was taken with the imagery, made it look more ginormous, make it look more larger than it really is.
Mm-hmm.
Which would make sense, especially if it's taken with a cell phone, because, contrary to popular belief, your iPhone 11 Pro or your Samsung Galaxy whatever will not take a picture better than a DSLR when it comes to this one particular thing. DSLR is digital single lens reflex.
Yeah.
Right? The cameras where you can take the lenses off and stuff. Because those cameras where you can take the lenses off and put different lenses on give you what's known as depth in your image, otherwise known as depth of field. Whereas these cell phone cameras, right, have a really shallow or flat depth of field. So when you look at an image, it's hard to tell whether the object in front of you is 2 feet in front of you or 100 feet away from you, because the image gets flattened, which would bring a tiny bat, right? If it's flying in front or off to the side of the car and you see it, that tiny bat can look just as large as a house flying by in relation to the background, because the image itself is flattened and you have no sort of depth perception.
Yeah.
So if I had to look at this, if somebody walked up to me and said, "What do you think?" I'd say, "Well, I think it's a pretty interesting photograph you showed me, and I'm pretty sure it's garbage." Just saying.
Do we even call it a photograph? Because...
it looks like a picture.
Well, to some extent, some of these submitted evidence things aren't even photographs because
They're
they've
like
been
screen grabs
manipulated.
off of, well, yeah.
And they're
I don't know. It
images.
just doesn't look real to me. I mean,
It's an
honestly, it
image.
could very well be a big fat moth flying by.
Oh, yeah.
So.
Oh, yeah, like if it was one of those pink lemonade moths like stuck to your windshield on a rainy day.
Well, that's oddly specific, but yeah, I guess it
because
could be.
those things have a similar shape, you know?
Oh, yeah. Kind of moth-like.
Yeah, my biggest problem with this is I could have sworn I've seen this before.
You have?
I clicked on the bottom link, and it leads to Philly Voice telling you it's from 2015.
4 years ago.
Yeah, and that Cryptozoology News featured it, and then Disclosure.tv featured it. Yeah. But again, from 2015, an hour outside the city of Philly, only refers by initials, and all they have is that singular image.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it's not, I don't think it is what it is, but who might I say? Could be wrong. Very well, maybe.
My thing is,
But, you know.
it's just been circulating all the Facebook groups and social media for
Yeah, who cares?
a
Let's
week.
move on. It's not even worth looking
I
at.
know.
It's one of those pictures like, all right.
Yeah.
Now, here's something worth looking at. The truck of the future. So Tesla went ahead and, released their new truck.
Yeah.
CyberTruck. Right? Kind of came out of nowhere. I mean, it didn't really come out of nowhere. We knew that Tesla was working on a truck. You know what I mean? But there was no real leaks to it or anything like that. No leaked images. And
Which is pretty cool.
yeah. But now here's the thing. This thing looks... I gotta tell you, I'm not a fan. I don't like it. It looks like a angular sort of box on wheels. I mean, for as futuristic as they're trying to make this thing appear to be, it looks like they just got lazy in the design department and they just shaved like half a diamond off and stuck some clunky looking wheels underneath it.
It looks like Super NES F-Zero or like Windows 95 game. It's Minecraft comes to mind.
I mean, and it's supposed to be this really large, huge electric pickup truck, 500-mile range. You can get 3 motors in it, starting cost of about $39,900.
Ugh.
Yeah, but they say the base of the truck starts with a single motor, $39,900, good for about 250 miles of range, and you can tow 7,500 pounds and have a 0 to 60 time of 6.5 seconds. Now, you can get a dual motor version, like as in 2 electric motors, for $49,000. It can tow 10,000 pounds and go to 60 miles an hour in 4.5 seconds for 50 miles more range. Now, if you get the top of the line at $69,900, it'll go more than 500 miles between charges, hit 0 to 60 in 3 seconds, can tow 14,000 pounds. Impressive specs for such an ugly-looking vehicle. It looks like you took a pyramid and flattened it down and stuck it on a rectangular base and then put some clunky-looking wheels. The arches look stupid. You know what? Maybe this is the way it's supposed to be, but I got to tell you, I don't like it, man.
People online are comparing it to Laura Croft and certain Pokemon. It so
looks
bad.
Like if you were in the 60s as a kid and you were trying to draw a futuristic car, this is what it would look like.
It looks like something my parents stuck on the fridge because I drew it.
Like a triangle with some wheels on it, And the back up, I'm just not a fan. I mean, I'm sure it may be the future, and it's too... I think it's lazy design. I mean, maybe I can't appreciate the heavy-duty body, and they're talking about how resistant it is, and it's almost like bulletproof, and the glass is like bulletproof, and, well, guess what? That's not the case.
Well, everybody's joking about, basically everyone in the design department and during all the design meetings were like, okay, what should the design for the new truck be? And then, what, did Elon go around and say, ever play a racing game from 2003?
I don't know. And somebody brought up one thing where they said that it's the exact opposite of every truck you see out there, where it's got rounded stuff going on. This has angular stuff going on.
But it's not even...
It's just weird. I don't particularly care for it. I mean, to me, it looks lazy. There's a guy hitting it with a rubber sledgehammer. Look, it didn't even put a dent in it. It's like, okay, well, that's great.
Yeah.
Maybe it'll grow on me.
It's grown on me. I actually like it, but not as a truck, as a vehicle, maybe.
It looks like a better version of the Pontiac Aztek. That's all I'm going to say about that.
But it's not a truck to me.
Well,
at all.
No, it's a truck. They're calling it a CyberTruck.
I mean,
you know, I'm just not.
And granted, the presentation was short. It's one of the shortest ones Elon's ever done. It was only 25 minutes before he said, "Okay, you know what? Let's everybody do a test drive." I think if they hammer out all the problems, I think it could be a very interesting vehicle.
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of like the design, but not as a truck.
I think
it's like I'd finally be able to drive around something I drew when I was in elementary school, and that's just goals to me.
Yeah, no, I don't like it. I don't like the way it looks. I don't think it's going to be as usable as a pickup truck as you think it would be.
Yeah, that's the part where I'm like, I don't. And they didn't mention if it's 4-wheel drive. I mean,
it wouldn't necessarily matter with electric motors, because if you had, electric motors, they could drive each wheel independently. That won't necessarily be a thing, but they haven't really said a whole lot.
Yeah.
I mean, the suspension lifts up and down, and there's like this built-in tailgate looking thing, which is cool. But at the end of the day,
I mean, if you buy the base model,
you're not getting all that.
Yeah, so it doesn't seem very useful.
I mean, there's other trucks out there, like the Rivian, and Ford is building an all-new battery-powered F-150 in the next few years, so it might be better. Anyway, trucks from the future, designed by meatheads from the 60s, I guess. I'm just not impressed.
Yeah. Ooh.
Yep. Okay, so with the news get done and out of the way, and if you have a chance to look at this, you should take a look at it when it comes to like the Jersey Devil photo and the truck from the future. And everything we talk about on the podcast, we have in our show notes. So our show notes are put on our website, CreepGeeks.com. And it also shows up, wherever you're listening to the podcast. We try to put a copy of our show notes in there. So if there's links that you'd like to look at or pictures that you'd like to, kind of see what we're talking about, you can certainly click on those and follow them. So it's kind of useful like that if you want to take a look. But if you're bored and you're listening right now and you're by your computer, go ahead and Google Cybertruck Tesla if you haven't already, and you can see what we're talking about. And then for the Jersey Devil photo, just do Jersey Devil photo Pennsylvania, and you'll kind of come up with what we're talking about. So we got up early in the morning and we loaded our vehicle, our Albino Rhino, our DIY simple camper van of adventure and paranormal investigation mobile. / useful van that holds lots of stuff, has a queen size bed in the back. It's got heat, like, if you're camping. Got some storage for food, all of that stuff. It was all packed up and loaded and ready to go because we're going to the Western Pennsylvania. Excuse me. Yes, it does have a sink. Western Pennsylvania Conference on the Unexplained, and we knew that we wanted to go to a couple different places. So the conference was Saturday and Sunday, if I remember correctly, but we wanted to get there a little early, and what we figured we would do is we would leave early and go on a trip and see areas that we talked about in the past, kind of on the podcast, but areas that we really wanted to go check out. And we thought the weather was going to be great. We're like, yeah.
Yeah.
It was not. So anyway,
literally
it was a trip.
Weather started to change as we were driving. We got on the road for about an hour and a half, 2 hours, and the forecast started changing.
No, it's about 3 hours.
Yeah.
So the original forecast is like it's going to be great, right? 50, 60 degrees, and it won't be cold. It'll be nice and sunny.
It won't start raining till the last day of the convention.
It got down to 19, and it was some of the roads looked like they could get a little slippery. But I'll tell you what was worse than that was basically being on the road and trying to get around the turnpike tolls.
Yeah.
So in order to save $4, I took a 20-mile detour.
Actually, it ended up being more than that on our way back.
But on the way there,
and
nobody cares about the way back. We're not even there yet. This is technically a 4-part series, Omi. So pay attention. This is part 1 of the 4-part series. We're talking about going to Flatwoods in West Virginia, Sutton, West Virginia.
Yeah, because we took
And
those.
just so you know,
Yeah.
the museum cost is free,
Yes.
as in no dollars.
But those cold, slippery, rainy mountain roads that we took as a detour kind of cost us not just, treacherous driving, but time. We were afraid that we weren't going to get there by the time the museum was,
Yes, so we called.
Yeah, and the first time I called, it probably seemed like I hung up on him, but no, we lost signal. So then I had to call again.
Yes.
And he was like, no, we'll be here. So,
And
then,
by we, it was just one dude.
well, we don't know. There could have been somebody in the back.
No, there was nobody in the back.
Okay, I don't know.
So don't exaggerate.
I'm not. I'm speculating. There's a difference.
No, because okay. So we showed up. It was relatively late. I believe it closed at 5:00, and we got there about 4:30. So, and this is the Braxton County Visitor Center and Flatwoods Museum.
Yes.
Right. And it's downtown. It's in Sutton, West Virginia. It used to be an old like drugstore.
Yeah.
Where they had the old school counter where you get ice cream and stuff like that made, and had all the pharmacy type stuff. So it was pretty cool. So we go in there, and we have a specific question in mind, because one of the questions that we were looking at was really just trying to find an answer about a third incident report that came out of this particular region. And all that will become clear in just a minute when we actually kind of go through and tell you what the Flatwoods Monster really is, what it's all about.
Yeah.
So we were lucky enough to get there to talk to Andrew Smith, who's the executive director. He's a great guy. Chatted up with him for a while. Went in there and said, hey, can we take some pictures and stuff like that? He said, you can do anything you want. And when you have questions, just ring the bell.
Yeah.
And we were like, okie dokie. So we got the free run of the place and got to go through and look at all the memorabilia that's there, multiple costumes and iterations and different types of depictions of the Flatwood Monster.
Which was really interesting.
Yeah, had a nice little couch and chairs to sort of sit down and check it out. It was pretty good. And what we found is Andrew is full of information, good information. So, and we were lucky enough to go through and ask our question. He explained his idea of what that meant and pretty much gave us about 18 minutes of a conversation that we're going to add into the podcast.
Yeah.
So we were able to talk to him for quite a bit. But if you've never heard of the Flatwoods Monster, we have to kind of tell you the story of the Flatwoods Monster. It's one of the weirdest looking cryptids out there. And technically, since it's like an alien UFO space guy, it's kind of hard to call it a cryptid, but it kind of fits in that category because it's just so odd looking.
Yeah.
So.
Well, part of cryptid, or the definition of cryptid, is outlier. And this is certainly an outlier, but it's an outlier of other cryptids.
Well, the question that we had kind of ties it back into being a cryptid, and we'll get to that in a little bit.
Yeah.
But we kind of have to tell you about the story of the Flatwoods Monster. So, there you go.
Okay.
You ready?
Yeah.
Go for it.
All right. So, September 12th, 1952, there's 4 to 5 kids playing on the lawn of the Flatwoods Elementary School when they saw what appeared to be a bright, pulsing, pear-shaped object that flew over and then slowly landed behind the G. Fisher farm. Now,
It was flying blunt end first.
Yeah, and that's the other part.
Yeah.
Now, the oldest boy remembered that someone had come to the school and requested that if they had any meteor sightings to report them to the Geologic Survey and to retrieve any rocks or findings. And that's actually according to the original Ivan Sanderson interviews.
Yeah.
So the oldest boy, being as bright as he was like, let's go check it out. And then there's a full account of what happened when they checked it out. Days after the event, witnesses experienced throat irritation, symptoms similar to mustard gas exposure.
Well, let's back up a little bit, because this is important things about the event. You can't just, you kind of have to understand the whole thing. So these people ran over there to go see what was crashed because they didn't know what it was. They just assumed that whatever this was crashed behind, the Fisher farm, right?
Yeah.
And the people who went over there was, according to the reports, you had Edward May, Freddie May, Neil Nunley, Tommy Heyer, And since they were all out there playing together and they seen it, they all kind of went to go see what was going on and see what this thing was, right? So you can maybe retrieve something for the Geological Survey, that kind of thing. So May went with them, and she was the oldest, and there was a young man there. He was 18, and he was going to join the National Guard. I don't think he was in the National Guard at the time.
Yeah. Oh, and the family dog.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, here, in this particular report, and here's where I kind of have some problems with some of what's being said.
Yeah.
They say it's the family dog, but according to the reports in the Ivan Sanderson interview, the dog was not the family dog. The dog was just a local sort of neighbor dog. It just kind of went along with him.
Okay.
And Sanderson says he was a collie type dog.
Mm.
So, okay. So they go, and they go to see this, whatever this is. They open this gate. It's a 5-bar gate, right, to go, and the gate becomes important in the story. They go through the gate, and like according to Sanderson, he says, like good country people, they shut and lock the gate. Because, I mean, the gate's 5 bars. It's obviously there to keep animals or livestock in or whatever, you know. You want to make sure to shut the gate. So they go, and they get over the hill, and they see this, you know, what looks to be like kind of a large pear-shaped object, which really looked more like the ace of spades, sitting in the field, blunt side down, kind of glowing, right? Mm-hmm. And they say it's about as big as a house, like 2-story house.
Yeah.
And they're looking at it, and underneath this thing, and sort of emanating all around it, is this weird sort of gas, this horrible smelling type stuff coming out of it.
Yeah.
And they're looking at it, and the dog went running off and ran into the fog, the haze, the gas coming off of it, and started, you know, as soon as he got into the fog, it hightailed it back out of there, you know, barking and screaming, you know, yelping the whole time, and ran away.
Yeah.
Well, one of the boys dropped a flashlight.
Oh.
Because it was getting near dark, and it was almost sunset, and so they brought a flashlight with them. Dropped the flashlight, bent down, and actually wound up sticking his head in this haze. Right, this fog, this you know, low-lying ground like stuff. It smelled like, what did they say? Like noxious molten metal.
Yeah.
So anyway, he came out of the gas, if you will, and eventually. It makes him pretty sick, and we'll kind of talk about that in a second. So anyway, while they're looking at this object that's in this field, and it's pulsing, there was no heat coming off of it, and it's kind of glowing from within, and it appeared to be black when it wasn't glowing, like orange and red, that sort of thing.
Yeah. They
looked, and over to the left, underneath the branch of a tall tree, about 12 feet off the ground, was the Flatwoods monster. You know, this thing had a round head. It looked like it was wearing like a hood. Right, so it had almost an ace of spades sort of shape behind its head. Yeah. And it looked like it was wearing like a mechanical apparatus, almost like an old dive suit kind of thing. And it, you know, it appeared to be mechanical in nature. It had long, spindly, sort of like robotic, like mechanical type arms, although between mechanical and it was wearing a suit, and that was the weird thing. And it kind of had looked like a dress, and it appeared to be about 10 to 12 feet tall.
And the eyes glowed.
And the eyes glowed. It had these 2 big round eyes, and you know, you could see behind them. And so it was like it was wearing a diving mask. It looked to be like almost like a diving mask. Yeah. And it had these 2 blue beams that were coming out of the eyes, and it appeared to be scanning the landscape.
Which like is weird, because the eyes are glowing orange, but then it's a blue beam. Yeah. Yeah, that's weird. I don't know.
So it looked like this thing was, you know, had like a head shaped like a spade and almost had like a dark metal dress on. And they said the hands were twisted and clawed, right? Yeah. Eyes glowed orange, but it had these 2 beams that, you know, it's kind of appeared to be looking for something. It also levitated off the ground, and it had that strange, sickening sort of mist coming off of it. Oh. And so when they looked at it, and after I think it was the boy named Lemon who shined his light up at this thing, it sort of turned around and leaned over to look at them, and they were some distance away from it. Yeah. And once it sort of like turned and looked at them, they took off because they seen it, and they're like, "We're out of here," right?
And that's where I have to remember from the interview, as opposed to like what's on the web that you can find, is like they hightailed it. They really did.
They hauled ass. They did not hang around.
Yeah.
And people were, when this report came out, and they're like, well, what about the gate? You know, how did you guys get over the gate? And according to the Ivan Sanderson report, like one boy said, he doesn't know, he was too small, so he just went underneath the hedge because it was quicker. Some people went between the bars of the 5-bar gate. And they asked about Mrs. May. And this little boy said she took it and won, which means that she just hopped right over that thing and they kept on going.
Hopped over a 5-foot fence.
Yeah, well, 5-bar. We don't know if
bar,
it's,
yeah.
and they figure it's probably, a 5-bar is probably about, 5.5 feet tall.
Yeah.
And they took off, and that was it. And they sort of ran away. Now, some of the other reports that kind of came in around that time also talk about there was a farmer who was further away, and he can see across, and he had these old World War I like spy glasses or binoculars, if you will, and because he thought a house was on fire because of this glowing thing.
Yeah.
And he watched it, and he watched the ship or whatever this thing was just sort of slowly sort of glow and then blink out of existence as it shrunk to almost a pinpoint and just completely disappeared.
Like phase out or...
Yeah.
Okay.
And the thought is that this thing, this Flatwoods monster with the spade-shaped head and the big round eyes and all that sort of thing, just was trying to make its way back to the ship. So once it seen these kids and they took off running, it went to try to go back to its ship, and it evidently got inside and sort of disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that dog, sadly, was very sick after going into that fog, that haze, that gas.
Yeah.
And eventually died. And the boy who stuck his head in the haze, the gas, the fog, very sick too.
Yeah.
Because they had, anybody that experienced this gas, had irritations like throat irritations and vomiting, nausea, and it lasted for days.
And the problem was, these symptoms at the time were passed off as side effects of hysteria.
Right. But they had the same sort of telltale symptoms of what you're going to say, like mustard gas.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. So eventually they went back and they called the police. The police showed up sometime thereafter. There's a little bit of discrepancy on when the police showed up.
Yeah.
They didn't see anything, but, they weren't there very long in the area where the sighting took place. But they didn't have to be, because one of the reasons that, sort of leads me to think that they actually went and investigated was because they said the same thing about the smell.
Yeah.
They could smell a lingering, putrid, horrible, nasty smell of like molten metal. Almost, I don't know what mustard gas smells like, so maybe it smells it was like a foul, sulfurous smell, right? So, sadly, the dog passed away, and everybody else was relatively safe. The craft sort of blinked out of existence. Yeah. But that wasn't the only sighting. There was a couple more.
Yeah. You talked about the farmer who reported seeing the ship basically phase in or...
Yeah, sort
shrink.
of blink out of existence.
Yeah, and then prior to the Fisher Farm sighting, there was a report that was filed near the town of Heaters, which is 5 miles north of Flatwoods. And that was Audra Harper and her friend. They were taking a shortcut to a nearby store through the woods since the main road was impassable. I guess weather or conditions, the road conditions deteriorated.
It was just ruddy.
Yeah, it was just ruddy. So they were walking, and it was going to be a mile walk as opposed to a few mile walk.
Yeah, they took a shortcut. They were taking a shortcut through the woods.
Yeah, so a half mile into their trip through the woods, they saw a ball of fire on a nearby hill. Now, at the time, Harper dismissed it, assuming that one of her neighbors was fox chasing or fox hunting.
Yeah.
But then when she glanced back, she saw something unbelievable. The fire had vanished, and in its place stood the tall, dark silhouette of a man-shaped figure. Terrified, Harper and her friend ran, escaping among the rocks and boulders strewn about the hillside. And that report had been filed the day before. So, the interesting part about that, though, is, the ball of fire that's on the hill, it kind of correlates with what the farmer was saying, the little beacons,
Yeah.
And then those two accounts happened.
Yeah.
And then there's that third account.
Now, the third account's the one that we had a little bit of an issue with because we've been kind of doing a little bit, research about it because we thought it was pretty interesting overall.
Yeah.
The entire Flatwoods monster sort of story. And this third account is why we think that this thing may be a little bit of a cryptid or why it could be called a cryptid versus just like an alien monster from outer space kind of thing.
Yeah, and I also don't feel that strongly. I don't know. I have some concerns about the third sighting.
Yeah.
No, but that third sighting allegedly happened the day after September 12th. George and Edith Snitowski.
Yes, Snitowski.
And their infant son,
18-month-old.
Yeah, driving through the rural area between Clay and Braxton County on Route 4 when their car suddenly died. Frametown Monster.
Yeah, so basically when the car died, they were in Frametown, and this is where the Frametown Monster incident sort of sprung up.
Yeah.
So 24 hours after the Braxton County Monster, or the Green Monster, or the West Virginia Monster, or what we're calling the Flatwoods Monster occurred in Flatwoods, this account happened in Braxton County about 17 miles away, right? Mm-hmm. And this third report, or third encounter happened 17 miles away in the Frametown area.
That's the other thing. Is the area ever pinpointed down?
No. It's kind of... So you have George and Edith Snitowski, their 18-year-old son. They were driving through the rural area, right?
18-month-old, yep.
That's what I said. I said 18 months. In the real world, I would just say he's a year and a half year old.
I know, right?
Yeah.
You have a toddler.
You got a baby. So their car died, and Mr. Snitowski, I can't say it.
Yeah.
Tried just to restart the car, wouldn't start. It was nighttime. The road was deserted. And while they were trying to figure out what to do, a foul, sulfurous smell filled the area, and their baby began to cry. A strange, bright light filled the darkness, and the couple witnessed a 10-foot-tall creature hovering in front of their car. And the description is really similar to that of the original sightings.
Yeah.
Except this time the monster was not wearing what is presumed to be its spade-shaped hood. Instead, its head was reportedly reptilian and bony.
Oh.
Yeah. And the arms were not necessarily mechanical. They were just thin and spindly. And the creature dragged its lizard-like hand across the hood of the car before drifting away into the woods. And as soon as the monster was out of sight, the car restarted and the couple sped away.
Okay.
So the reptilian sort of thing makes me think more cryptid. And if you're bored, Google reptilians. It'll take you hours and hours
down
and
a
weeks.
rabbit hole.
Yeah, it's a huge rabbit hole.
But for me, instead of the reptilian, this screams straight UFO.
Well, but not if the reptilians come out of the center of the earth where they're supposed to come from, and they have advanced technology, and they fly, and they can fly around.
Like some of the typical UFO accounts, the car stalls on a deserted road, allegedly deserted road.
Yeah, but I mean, that could be pure happenstance.
And then the car restarts again.
Well, yeah, if you have this guy, this reptilian dude, flying around on something that basically is using magnetic energy of some type of magnetic propulsion to fly, right? Mm-hmm. Which will create its own type of EMF or electromagnetic force and possibly cause, electromagnetic radiation type issues. In other words, almost like creating an EMP, right? Yeah. Because it's using that to propel itself, and some of the byproduct is that stinky, smelly stuff. And it kills the car, and the car dies. There you go. Yeah. I mean, who's to say? Because if there's some theories that some of the UFOs and stuff that you see are actually reptilians, right? And that reptilians are an advanced race that live in sort of underground. I mean, if you're bored, you can watch like Nazis on the Moon and all those other sort of movies that sort of tie it all into place. But then if you look at what happens in the 60s, and you have what they reported in the 60s, where in Dulce, the underground military bases where they're fighting aliens and reptilians, and like 60 people died. Yeah. It's like this huge shootout. So I don't know. And since the reptilian thing is a thing, and if you really want to do some research on it, and we're not going to talk about it because we don't know enough to speak intelligently about reptilians other than
they're weird.
It's possible that they live among us.
Stop.
So anyway, they drug its little lizard-like hand across the car as it flew away, and he got further away. The car started up, and they sped away. Yeah. So I can kind of see in this report is completely different than the other one. So
because
and the reason why it's completely different is the description of the monster, because the other sighting, the primary sighting that happened in Flatwoods, right? Mm-hmm. with Mrs. May hurdling the fence, the dog dying, and 4 other kids, is that the description that they did and they drew, all these people drew the description, and it looks similar, very similar.
Yeah.
You know, the spade-shaped hood / helmet, the round head, the 2, you know, sort of orange-red glowing eyes kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And this one is different.
But
so
there's 2 things. The description is different. On top of that, the creature's actions, because the Fisher sighting, that the kids and the woman, they didn't stick around long enough, but it did not seem like the creature was going to interact with them directly.
No, I was trying to get out of there.
And then the same thing with Audra Harper. You know,
she just seen it and ran away.
Yeah, she seen it and ran away. But it didn't seem like the creature was going to interact with her. The creature is different, and it interacted with the vehicle. So to me, that's different.
Yeah, as it drifted off into the woods, maybe it was just trying to get away.
Okay. I mean, it touched
maybe, but maybe it was just, maybe it's never seen a shiny car like that.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, you have like a whole bunch of weirdos that just went up. Let's go over the hill and see what this thing was. I mean, if you look at them like this, like 4 to 5 kids and Mrs. May, they're like, let's go check it out.
Don't you think it's weird though that somebody came to their school and said, "Keep an eye on the sky if you see anything"?
We don't know if they came to the school or if they just heard it on, during a science class. I mean, who knows? I mean, because they could have just seen it on TV,
Yeah.
But I don't know if I would actually want to give that advice, from like a geological survey. Hey, if you see something fall from the sky, go find it for us. You know what I mean? Well, especially these days with satellites and things like that, because when Skylab was coming down, they're like, stay away,
Or the Samsung satellite that landed in somebody's yard recently.
Yeah, the selfie satellite thing.
Yeah, destroyed their tree.
So this thing is really weird, this Flatwoods monster, the picture. Yeah. It's unusual shape. Now you've got different video games and Japanese culture have picked up on the sort of the picture or depiction of this creature and have been using it. Fallout 76 has Flatwoods monsters in it and Mothman and everything else. So we wanted to know a little bit more about the third encounter because it's different. You know what I mean? It has a reptilian in it flying around, a lizard man, lizard alien, whatever, flying around in it. And there were some red flags that kind of got popped up, right, that you brought up. And it's one of the things that, we knew that if we went to the Flatwoods Monster Museum, we wanted to ask this question to see what somebody else thought about it, too. Because to us, it's a little like, why is it so different? Yeah. So the first red flag.
Oh, okay. Well, the first red flag is the fact that the encounter was not immediately reported. Everyone else, the farmer, Audra Harper, the Mays, and the kids, they reported it as soon as it happened. Yeah. But the Snitowskis, they didn't report it till years later. I mean, 1950.
About 3 years later.
Yeah, 1955, which is just about enough time to really study the situation and all the other accounts. Because, yes, before the internet, you had to go buy back issues of the newspaper. You had to go do your research. You had to go talk to people.
Terrible times.
Yeah. So 3 years before it gets reported. And when it does, it gets reported to Mail Magazine, which is like the equivalent of like a gentleman's magazine where you get weird stories and letters to the editor and stuff like that. And also back in the 50s, you used to be able to send in stories to magazines like Mail Magazine, and they would pay you if your story was bizarre enough or interesting enough, or it would increase readership of the magazine. Yeah. And the reason I know that is because I like pulp authors and weird authors like H.P. Lovecraft, and when you follow certain authors' history, it's like, wow, this guy was a great writer. He sent his story in for $200, and that's it.
That's what they, yes.
And that's kind of sad, but then you realize not just these great authors, but these everyday people like the Snitowskis probably did the same thing,
Possibly. So that sort of, 3 years later, the story didn't make much sense, Yeah. And why was it so drastically different? Why was why did it wait so long? All that sort of thing. So.
And no location.
No real location. If they're passing through, I can kind of understand that. See, there's parts of it that make sense and parts of it don't make sense. So when we spoke to Andrew Smith about it, and he's like you said, he's the executive director of the Braxton County Visitor Center and Flatwoods Museum, who we will call the curator. Just to give him a super sweet title, right? But anyway, we went and talked to him, and you asked him this question, and basically this was his response.
That third encounter, you feel that it may not be as genuine, so...
That's just my, George Snotowski's story. It's just my gut when I read it.
Yeah.
That I tend to err more on the side of it possibly being a made-up story. But the only reason, one of the reasons why I have doubts of it is because I can't figure out to what end.
Yeah.
Because really all it does is help to enforce the September 12th story. So it doesn't help debunk it. But I suppose there could be something where maybe somehow with some amount of misinformation, maybe it should have an intended consequence.
Yeah.
That maybe it didn't have, or maybe it just hasn't become, maybe I just haven't realized why. But yeah, so the reason why I have doubts is, like I said before, is that he's non-local, so vetting his character is nearly impossible. He only ever did one interview, declined every other interview that I know of.
Who did he do the interview with? Do you remember?
With the now defunct, I believe, like Men's Health magazine called Mail Magazine.
Oh, okay.
M-A-L-E.
Who, back in that time, they used to pay for stories.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you could send in your weird stories.
Okay.
Yeah. I know about that.
But so his story is that he was from New York City, but visiting family in Cincinnati, and coming back from Cincinnati.
Yeah.
And if you map it out, it's actually that was the first thing that made it seem outlandish to me that he would take that route. However, when you actually map it out on Google Earth and you tell it to ignore interstates, to where you'd be only taking the roads that would have been there at the time, it's not too far off what is the most direct path. It's about 2 hours off the direct path. It takes you from, the most direct path is like a 15-hour drive, and this path taking you through Braxton County is like a 17-hour drive.
Okay.
So if you don't have Google helping you out and telling you that you're going to waste 2 or more hours of your life, you might not be obvious.
Or if you're avoiding the main roads to avoid things like cops or something like that, that could be another possibility.
Could be, but when you're driving between our various regions in West Virginia and surrounding states, the in-between is kind of, I don't want to say empty, but kind of empty. Yeah. So you're really not worrying about cops at that point. The more direct route actually would have been that he would have driven through, he would have entered into the state at Parkersburg.
Okay.
That would have been the most direct route. Huh. But so this puts you a little bit lower. But like I said, it's not too far off. Because my first thought whenever I thought about it was that it was like a big L that makes no sense. But it's really not. It makes more sense than you think. So that semi-checked out. And then, his story wasn't reported on until 3 years after the September 12th sighting took place. So plenty of time to cook up a story, plenty of time to get to know the original story, because it contains a lot of the same elements. Yeah. It's just, if the Flatwoods monster story, has an intensity of like 3, his has an intensity of 10.
Yeah.
And it's very detailed. It's detailed in a way that when I read it, it feels written rather than experienced.
Yeah, and that's the thing. There's a lot of detail in certain elements, but then the basic elements, like as far as a journalist is concerned, the who, what, when, where, why, especially the where, that's missing.
Yeah. And another thing that's real big in that same vein is, to me, he describes like the forested area and the road and all this stuff a lot. not once in any of the accounts that I've read, anyway. It's possible I missed something. I always like to give everything a caveat.
Yeah.
I'm not an encyclopedia or anything, so I just know what I know. But from everything that I've read, at no point does he ever mention the river, which all of Route 4 follows the Elk River.
Yeah.
So that entire section that he said it was between here and here is literally a bank away from the Elk River at all times.
And he should be able to see it while on his
I would think
trip.
so,
Yeah.
or he would have noticed it.
Yeah.
So, and then then the other side of the river, although very sparsely, and probably even more sparsely then than now, but there are homes. I mean, there's population along that whole route. So,
he could have
at no
stopped and
point
got
was
him.
there mention of passing houses or seeing houses or being near houses or anything like that. And then later talked about continuing to drive north, and brought him into Sutton, which is where we are right now, and finding, he mentions an all-night diner and with like an attached hotel.
Yeah.
I've not been able to find any record of an all-night diner.
Oh.
But that
Okay.
it's possible that could have been a misremember or something. Maybe it closed at 11, and maybe he made an assumption.
Yeah.
And maybe he got here right before. But I've still not been able to fully figure out if it was a hotel
Yeah.
in Sutton, then it was the Century Inn just up the street.
Okay.
Because that's the only thing that I know of that would have been operating at the time.
But if he was just completely discombobulated or whatever about the location, then would it have been, like you were saying, like a Strange Creek or the other location?
Well, like I said, in his report, the one thing he specifically mentions is on Route 4, between essentially Clay County and Gasaway, which is in Braxxie County. And I usually say Ivydale in Clay because that's near the border, you know.
Okay.
But I don't know if he actually said Clay County or Ivydale.
Yeah.
That's another thing too. The way he talks about the locations in, it's kind of in enough detail. It's enough detail that if you looked at a map, you would know that amount of detail. But if you would have experienced it, I think the detail would have been either far more detailed and specific or far more general. Like, I think if it was purely experienced, I think it would have been something like, that's somewhere in West Virginia.
Yeah.
Like, I have to think that would have been that's where it was.
Yeah,
somewhere
because
in
the
West
shock
Virginia.
and the trauma
Yeah.
either cause two things. It's either, I know where this place is,
Yeah.
or it's, I was so lost in West
Yeah.
Virginia, you know?
Saying somewhere
So,
between Clay and
yeah.
Braxton, that there's something about that seems just specific enough to be fishy.
Yeah.
But the one thing that's brought me back to possibly feeling like it could be substantiated from another experience or from a related experience was there's a guy that I was able to speak to and that lives in Strange Creek, and he said if the experience that he remembers really happened to him and he didn't dream it up, he would have had to have been 3 years old. So that gives him some doubts.
Yeah.
But the memories that he was able to recall were so vivid to him. And actually, Frank's book that you just showed there, he bought a copy of that book when that came out just because he's from Braxton and wanted to read a book that had to do with his home area. But other than that, he wasn't reading it as an eyewitness to see if it was right. He was just reading it as a interested person.
Huh.
So, but what shook the guy, and he told me not to say his name, so I don't say his name.
That's cool.
But what shook him was he was reading that book and he got to what Frank Ficino calls the Franktown incident, and there's an illustration in it that Frank drew based off of the description that George Slutowski gave.
Yeah.
And he said he saw that drawing, and it's like he was instantly paralyzed with fear. He dropped the book.
Yeah.
And for the next few minutes, he sort of dealt with what was going on inside of him.
Yeah.
And some of that was the memories that he had long since forgotten have started coming back into his head. So he is pretty sure that he saw what's illustrated in that book. And his story goes something like this. And that is that one night, in the middle of the night, he woke up and in his bedroom and happened to either look out his window or walk over to his window, but one way or another, he's looking out his window. And he sees a thing, and he said the best he could describe it would be exactly the way Frank drew it.
Oh.
Going across their property, near his home, going from like one side to the other. And he was so scared, ran out of his bedroom, went to see if anybody else was awake. He could try to get help or get comforted by or anything. And everybody was asleep, and he said everybody's doors were shut. And they said even at that time, he knew enough to know that if he bothered anybody while they were sleeping, that maybe he might get in trouble, or he felt like he would get in trouble. He didn't want to wake anybody up. So he just went back to his room, checked his window. There was nothing there anymore. Laid back in bed and calmed down well enough to go to sleep.
Yeah.
So, but the more he remembered that and thought about it, the more that he thought, he did the math, the more he thought, there's no way I'm remembering this from when I was 3. That doesn't make any sense. So finally, this ate at him long enough, and he pretty much kept it to himself, that he talked to his oldest sister. I believe he's the only boy with 4 sisters. But he talked to his oldest sister and said something to the effect of, I got something I need to tell you. That, you might think I'm crazy, but just hear me out. I think I saw the Flatwoods monster. And she said, okay, how?
Yeah.
So he told all that story that I just told you. And she said, well, you want to know something weird? She says, I could remember when you were real little, for like a couple weeks, you would talk about seeing some monster. And we all just assumed you either made it up or you saw something that maybe you misidentified, or you had a dream, and we just didn't think much of it, and then eventually you stopped talking about it.
Oh my.
And he had completely forgotten that he told anybody when he was a child. The only thing he remember was the incident, and that's it. So as far as he can tell, if this is a real memory, it's probably the earliest memory he still holds, and that anything contextually that wraps around it is gone. So, and that's about the right area. I mean, if you look if you drive to it, to Frametown, Strange Creek area, they're very close.
Yeah,
they're very, very close. So, and it would put that window of time. I mean, it lines up enough to make me second guess myself and think, well, maybe this George Natowski isn't.
Yeah,
full crap.
Because if we didn't come in here and talk to you, I kind of would have written that story off.
Yeah.
And it's like, because I didn't know about that story, the one you just shared in Strange Creek, and I'm like, okay, so there's more to this. And that's the one thing, like, when we tried to research and do some of this, we're like, okay, we have some of these facts, why aren't there some of these other facts? And coming here helps.
Well, in this, story that I told you, I didn't learn that until... I know, we've only been here for 2 years, so it was within that 2 years, because I remember calling them from my office back here. So, I just learned that not too long ago. And as far as I know, that hasn't been in any sort of like Small Town Monsters documentaries made before that. Yeah. Everything that I know of that recounts the story was made before that. So nothing's ever been published about it other than, like, I've talked about it now to you.
Yeah.
I talked about it on a radio show a couple weeks ago, and I believe I talked about it on a podcast a couple months ago where I was interviewed. So I'd say over the next couple years, that guy's story will kind of percolate.
That's incredible. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that story with us.
So, and we're back. Yeah. So we'd like to thank Mr. Andrew Smith for taking the time to talk to us, and we got there late. And we kind of kept him past closing time. I have to apologize for that. Yeah. And so I'm pretty sure that his family thought that there was something terribly wrong.
They called.
A lot. They're like, oh my God, what's going on? But no, we had a good time and chatting with him. And one of the things I told him I would do would to send him a link for something that we had talked about on our podcast earlier.
Yeah.
And it was about some elk hunters in New Mexico. And they had an experience, excuse me, and the experience, to me, sounded an awful lot like the Flatwoods experience because of some of the description and some of the unique details of the encounter that they had.
Yeah.
And this was in, basically in Taos Mountains, right? Excuse me, in Taos, New Mexico, Pot Mountain area. They were up there doing some elk hunting. No elk, which was a little unusual. They had a little bit of a close encounter of their own kind, I guess, you know.
Yeah.
I shouldn't say own kind, but they had a little close encounter. And the thing about it is, and we did talk about this in the podcast, is the way the description was and what they drew. And by they, there's this one fella who basically who likes to journal stuff.
Yeah.
I guess. And his name is Brinkley, Josh Brinkley. And they had these little shapes on the left and right side, oversized head. They had kind of black torsos. But he talks about the sort of hoses on the top and bottom, almost in a spade-like shape, right?
Yeah.
And the big head and the eyes and stuff. But he kind of draws this sketch, and if you close one eye and you look at him, like, that looks like the Flatwoods monster depiction.
It looks like a gray and black Flatwoods monster.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to find the link with the sketches he drew.
Well, the sketches are actually, I mean, we have links in our previous show notes that we can, probably...
there it is. I got it.
But since we reported it, and it's actually, and we actually talked about it on our podcast, which happened in September, they've gone back and talked to him and did a different interview. Mm-hmm. We can actually, because when they first did a report and talked to him, they were still in their elk hunting camo. But they've gone back and there's about a minute and a half worth of an episode or a click. What do you call it? Not click, like a clip.
Yeah.
Like a news clip on KRQE from Albuquerque, right? Which is where we used to live. And the dude, he shows the just basically what he's seen, and more importantly, he shows the shape of that huge, like, sort of circus tent looking thing with like a 50-foot or 100-foot long. So anyway, the description and what they said and how they said it sort of kind of reminded me of the Flatwoods monster. Kind of makes sense. That thing also sort of blinked out of existence.
Yeah.
So my thought originally was like, okay, so what if the Flatwoods monster shows up, right, in West Virginia, and eventually sort of makes its way to the desert, where it's still here, it's still living, it's still doing whatever, and never really went anywhere. Possible, right?
Yeah.
Especially if this thing can go invisible.
I think your theory on the last episode where it was like kind of like how Star Trek, they would like phase out and just observe.
Yeah.
That kind of creeps me out a lot to think that's what's happening with the Flatwoods monster. Oh.
I mean, it's possible. But see, here's the thing. What if it's really like reptilians and they were trying to do some flying, test out their flying machines, and it didn't work out so well? So, and here's why I say this. Yeah. Go ahead and say what you're going to say, and I'm going to tell you what I'm going to say. The
drawing of the ship that Brinkley provided, which has a large bottom and then a slightly pointed tip, spade-shaped head. The only difference is that it has that tube. So what if this one landed successfully and that tube's just like you were saying, a decontamination chamber?
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. What if it's like their house and they have this big, long decontamination sort of chamber area, Think about like being like a 100-foot long hallway that you go through and get decontaminated, and then, there you go. And they're like, oh, the guy's in? Okay, hit the invisible shield. Blah, blah, blah. You sort of blinking, like you can be in plain sight. Like in Star Trek, like when you have in Search for Spock? I can't remember where they land in like San Francisco. and they blow the cloak, and it like smashes a trash can. It's the old movie. It's the one where they get the whale. It's just the one I can't even remember, but...
And then the one thing was the investigator for this, I guess, Davenport, the National
the MUFON guy, or the National...
Yeah. UFO Reporting Center for Washington, Davenport. He was like, after listening to some 350,000 phone calls over 25 years, he thinks this one's credible. And I do too, because these guys are rugged elk hunter, no
They're
nonsense
just dudes,
guys.
man.
Yeah. And to the point where even at the end of these interviews and these news articles, Lucero says, look, I don't know about aliens. I've just never seen anything like that. And I've never seen anything that big just disappear.
Yeah.
And Brinkley's like, yeah, aliens, but, they're being matter of fact. So it's creepy that the description in the drawing is so close to Flatwoods.
I mean, to me, it's close enough. So,
yeah.
Yeah. So what I told him I would do is actually send him a link.
Yeah.
And I haven't done that, but I will. So I'll send him a link so he can kind of take a look at it. So there you go. So Andrew can take a look at the link, and we also have that link that's in our show notes as well. You can kind of take a look too.
Oh, and the fact that we checked with our New Mexico friends and there was no filming in that area too. Yeah. Yeah.
Because that's what they were originally thinking, the elk hunters in New Mexico. Because it happens. There's lots of filming that happens out there. It's a great place to film. And they're like, well, it's obviously in a movie set.
Yeah. Cerro de la Orla.
Yeah.
So
don't try.
Hey, I can try.
Yeah. Well, here's my thought too. And there was a theory that this came from sort of the Ivan Sanderson sort of interview where he talked about, and some of the follow-on questions that were sort of talked about theories, that this Flatwood monster incident, or the green monster, or whatever you want to actually call it, or even now the Frametown monster, was not just a one-off sort of thing. And allegedly there was like 6 to 7 meteor sightings that happened all around that area. It was seen from like West Virginia, Virginia, Tennessee. Yeah, these 6 like meteorites just whizzing by. And, this is the thing that got reported, but the theory, and I'm not exactly sure where the theory came from, I can't remember, but it was like these things came, the theory is they came into the atmosphere, they're flying by, maybe doing a little reconnaissance mission, kind of seeing what's going on. One of them flew through this chemical factory's exhaust plumes that came up, and sort of it completely lost control and went down.
Huh.
And the rest of them sort of went down to, land to try to, get their boy back.
That's a good
like
theory.
a little bit of a rescue mission, if you will. And so these things were down surveying the area, trying to find their other buddy, to kind of make it as simple as possible. And had been and ran into humans. And then after that, whether they got them back or not, the whole thing just sort of disappeared and was done, and the incident was over.
Yeah.
But what if it really wasn't over? What if, here it is 50 plus years later, whatever these things are, still here, just trying to keep it a low profile, hanging out in the desert.
Hanging out in like remote areas.
Well, that's where that was seen. What if they're not? What if they're like, can hang out most anywhere?
Yeah.
I don't know. But the shape of the craft being kind of an ace of spades, sort of almost kind of has like a pear look to it,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. It's just like this crazy thing. And one of the cool things is, aside from this being just a really weird story, is that the fact that the town is embracing their own little monster.
Yeah.
I'm sure that took some convincing, but it kind of makes sense, So if you want to go there and you were in that area and you should go. It's a cool little museum. And they have a couple different things, set up to sort of, get you around the town, if you will. They have these chairs set up, and if you go sit in each one of the chairs and you can kind of go back, you can get like some swag, like a sticker or a poster or something like that. So they've kind of embraced it.
And the little...
which we thought was actually pretty cool. And the fact at the museum, I thought was nice, to see a lot of the artifacts and some of the things were, preserved.
Yeah.
For you to sort of check out, and it was well done.
Kept for posterity, kept in good condition.
Yeah.
Documentation too, like
lots of documentation.
One of the costumes that has a mysterious origin, they documented exactly when they found it.
Yeah.
And, they're
Somebody
keeping track
made it.
of that.
It came from somewhere, but nobody knows where.
Yeah, and a lot of stuff that you don't see when you just do a Wikipedia search or something.
Yeah.
And it is a very beautiful museum, though. Like, you commented on the beautiful tile. I love.
Yeah, I didn't say it was beautiful though.
Well, your
tile is beautiful.
Well, it was, and then
It
all those
sounds kind of creepy. I said it's pretty neat mosaic.
all the bookcasey type shelves and the drawers from the pharmacy setup. I loved those. I took like 1 billion pictures of them.
Yeah.
And then the free Braxxie thing, which is basically go and sit in each of the chairs and get a selfie or a picture, and then show those pictures to the museum or fill out their online form.
Yeah.
I really wanted to do that, but again...
Yeah, 19 degrees and raining.
Yeah, horrible. Me and Pepper were going to do that, and we're going to have a great
Yeah.
time, but we'll have to do it some other time.
So the Flatwoods monster occurred in Flatwoods. Sutton is where the museum is located, so that's kind of the spot
Yeah.
to go check it out. So, and there's all sorts of things that you can do while you're there. Is it worth going to? Sure.
Yeah.
And if you go and you decide to make a video or something like that, put it up there so everybody can see it. Because they have some videos on their website that you can kind of check out. But there's also some T-shirts and stuff that you can look at. One of the T-shirts actually shows the drawings that were done by the kids.
Really? Okay.
And they're all slightly different, but they're all sort of the same. They have that spade shape, the round head, the 2 eyes, and the mechanical looking suit this thing was wearing. It almost looks like a dress. Kind of a crazy thing.
Yeah.
Super creepy. But it was super fun. So we went and we had a good time and we took a bunch of pictures and we had a chance to talk to Andrew for about 18 minutes or so and asked him a couple questions. And, hope you enjoyed the interview with him.
And that's one of the few small town museums I was not disappointed.
Yeah.
I mean, we've done a lot of...
Yeah. We're not going to tell you about our Bonnie and Clyde Museum and the original Bonnie and Clyde Museum right next to it. Ran by the same people. And it was just sort of sad. But anyway, this was actually a nice museum to go to, and it sort of made the trip better. So after we left, we decided that, hey, we should probably try to get close to Mothman.
Yeah.
Because on the map, what looked to be about 25, 30 miles away was really about 2 hours away.
Jeez.
So we had to drive. So we left Sutton, and we drove to Point Pleasant, West Virginia, where the goal was to stay the night, and then the next day, go explore some of the area around Mothman, occurrences that sort of happened, like the TNT area and Point Pleasant in general. And so we drove, and we were going to stay in West Virginia in Point Pleasant, but somehow or another, through the magic of GPS, we overshot our area completely, wound up staying in Ohio.
Yeah.
So, and we took our adventure mobile, camper van, investigation machine, pulled into the fine camping establishment known as Walmart's. And
Don't tell people.
what? Don't tell people what? Everybody knows that you can stay in Walmart overnight. You just got to call them first and check it out and make sure that you can do that.
Yeah.
If you do something like that, if you want to take an adventure and you're going to use your camper van or whatever, and you're going to stay in Walmart, keep it clean, man. Don't be throwing your trash around and being dirt bags. But anyway, we stayed, and that's where we tested the power of our heater as it got down to 19. It was really cold.
It was awful.
And we didn't make it.
That's not true.
No, it was fine. I mean, it was about 60, actually, in the van. It was just a little frosty. But yeah, it was good. So anyway, in our next podcast episode, we're going to talk about Mothman Museum, TNT area, and some of the traveling we had to do.
Huh.
Yeah. So, I don't know.
Oh.
That's about all we got as far as that goes. What do you think about that?
Users?
Yes.
Submissions?
Now, we do have a couple different things that we can talk about. And we're going to talk about one user submission before we wrap up the podcast. And, okay, when it comes to the Flatwoods Monster, there is a ton of resources on this. There's lots of things you can look at, and there's lots of books to read. We just did a 1,000-foot overview.
Yeah.
Like a helicopter view. But I will say, coincidentally, there was one thing. We actually talked about the third incident, and we did the interview, and Andrew was very nice to answer our questions. And he referenced the book where he's seen some of the information and said, you can, as written in this book, this is what this was said. I happen to have that very book. And the funny thing about this is, it's sort of a synchronous thing. I ordered that book off Amazon 2.5 months before we ever even did this trip at all. Because I wanted to do some research and, some information and do some information gathering on the Flatwoods Monster. So honestly, I took that book and put it on a shelf. We've been so busy doing all these, different events and conferences and things like that. Haven't really had a chance to go into it and read it. So we're in the Flatwoods Monster Museum, and I'm cracking that book open to refer to some of the things that he's talking about and looking at it. Right? And he's like, yeah, that book right there. And as I opened it up, I didn't realize this. It's actually signed by the author.
Yeah.
So what are the odds of buying a book off of Amazon and a couple months later you're in the Flatwoods Museum, Flatwoods Monster Museum, only to open that book up all the way and start going through all the pages and find, boom, it's actually signed by the author right there.
That's pretty cool.
And it's a book that's pretty popular on the subject too. So anyway.
And we'll put a link to that in the show notes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we have some user submissions, as we said that we would kind of do. And this one was just a little bit of a message for us.
Yeah. You might want to explain the backstory to this one after I'm done reading it, though.
No, I'm going to read it, and there is
Okay.
no backstory.
All right.
So anyway, it goes like this. Life is interesting. I'm never up on a computer at 3:30 a.m. Usually just lie in bed and watch TV. I've been getting attacked for 5 years. Those Bluetooth speakers I mentioned in the last email that play SD cards, filled with, music and cards filled with scripture and tones and exorcisms that I play, to get rid of these things. And I didn't break the speakers. And there's a few apps I can recommend. One's Ghost Hunting Tools, Detector by Weasel. Snowpack Studios have apps that actually work. Be careful. I spend most of my time trying to rid myself, and you are looking for them. They are all over and refuse to go. My computer is acting up. Have a good week, and find another hobby. Charlotte. Now, I read that exactly how it's written.
Yeah.
So it was a little disjointed, a little all over the place, but what I can figure is this. She had sent an email or an information. I can't really say it's an email because it came out super garbled. It didn't translate well in our contact form. It's available on our website, CreepGeeks.com, where she had said that the Bluetooth speakers that she uses to play scriptures and tones and exorcisms, because she's been getting attacked continually for 5 years, those speakers were destroyed, as in knocked off, just destroyed.
Yeah.
And they don't play anymore. And then she talked about some ghost hunting apps that she can recommend. Ghost Hunting Tools Detector by Weasel, and then Snowpack Studios have apps that work as well.
Yeah.
So I actually had to go and grab the code, the HTML code from her previous response and read it through all the tags and stuff. If you look at a code view of the page to figure out what she's talking about. But I like that. Because I'm not sure what she's referring to when she said, or why this made her or prompted her to actually respond to us. But she said, be careful. I spend most of my time trying to rid myself, and you are looking for them. They are all over and refuse to go.
That's kind of
ominous.
Ominous, like the whole, if you look too far into the abyss starts to look back into you. Yeah.
Yeah. So
And,
I don't know.
I mean, it's fun to talk about this stuff, and it's interesting to read and learn certain things.
Well, the problem is that we do some paranormal investigations and cryptid investigations too.
Yeah.
So, hey, if you start to stare in the abyss, right, it starts to stare back. So I think that was her way of saying, and we do appreciate, Charlotte, you taking the time to send us your contact, information there, your little warning for us. We do appreciate it, and we do take precautions. So.
Yeah.
And I hope you get your speakers fixed.
And
or new ones.
If you have something you want to say to the show, contact at CreepGeeks.com or 575-208-4025. Yeah.
Pretty much. So anyway, there you go. That was our helicopter view or overview of the Flatwoods monster.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So we'll put links to everything we talked about in the show notes for this podcast episode. We're even including links to the elk hunters' possible Flatwood experience, as well as some of the books that we referenced during this episode.
Yes, and if you're looking at our show notes on our website, CreepGeeks.com, down at the very bottom of our show notes is a little section called Friends of the Show, where we actually list people that we've talked to and hung out with and people that we know that have different things to talk about. They have different resources. They have books, and they do different things. There's some authors, some child authors. We have the people that we've been associated with at these conferences, and they are a wealth of resource, and it's down there called Friends of the Show. Yeah. So, and some of their Facebook information too, like KD and KT Stafford, who goes to Morgan City. You can kind of check out some paranormal equipment that they actually make, and Davinia Rush, and Mary Joyce, and Igor Burtsev, and She Squatchers, and Woodlings, and Lisa at Cryptid Conference, and Josh from the Everything Paranormal Show.
Yeah.
Twisted Paranormal is an awesome paranormal group. Right? David Spinks. There's just a bunch of them. So if you're looking for people on Facebook to follow and interact with, we can certainly recommend them. So, including also Andrew Smith, who we talked to.
Yeah.
And he's the Braxton, Virginia. Well, he's the curator.
I really want to go back when it's not sleeting and freezing cold.
Yes. And that's what we're going to do. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and wrap up the podcast. That's about all I have to say about everything. In our next podcast, we're going to talk about the Mothman and the Mothman experience.
Yeah.
And our travels, that'll be our part 2 of a 4-part series. That'll be episode number 148. You've been listening to Creep Geeks Podcast. My name is Greg.
I'm Omi.
That's it for this.
Yep.
See you later. Take it easy. Bye-bye.
I sell my soul to take you home. Yeah.